Welcome to the Working Well podcast, the show that dives into the fascinating intersection of human performance, business strategy, and leadership. Now, this is lesson number 2 in my 52 life lessons. I've created this series in addition to the interview episodes where I feature top leaders and subject matter experts that are making a positive difference in the future of work. So today in this 52 life lessons series, we're going to talk about something foundational, something that sits between your habits, your goals, and your success. And that's your why, your purpose, the reason you show up every day. Because, well, let's be honest, grinding without clarity, it's not noble. It's exhausting. All right. Why do you think this matters? Well, after a growth mindset, which was episode 1 of this series, one of the most pivotal lessons I've learned is to know your why. Now, I have to be very clear on this. You can exist without a purpose. Lots of people do. Perhaps even the majority of the population exists in this state. But if you want to move from surviving to thriving, emotionally, mentally, professionally, knowing how to live into your why, I believe it's non-negotiable. And I know this because I've experienced the entire spectrum, from not having a purpose to living into it deeply and losing sight of it, to then reconnecting with it again. These experiences have taught me that life is much more fun, it's more meaningful, and it's more productive when your why is front and center. I have to say that the 3 times throughout my life that I've experienced burnout are all during times where I either didn't know or I lost the connection to my purpose. Now, this isn't to say that knowing your why was going to solve all your problems, but it does make every aspect of the journey much more enjoyable, impactful, and meaningful. And I mention this because my goal is not simply to survive or to exist. It's to thrive. And in case you haven't already experienced it, there's a massive difference between surviving and thriving. Now, if we look at the majority of people today, they're what I call work or life zombies. They wake up each day, they go to work, they scroll some social media, they might hang out with some friends. They may take a couple vacations a year, and they repeat the process. Of course, they could have partners, they have kids, maybe they have a volunteer position, maybe there are other activities. And on the surface, this may seem normal, but it's often when we scratch below the surface that we find there's not much joy, passion, excitement, or energy in what they're doing. They're just on the treadmill. They're doing it every day. They're tired, they're run down, they're exhausted, they're disillusioned. And they're living in a loop that they think is either normal or they don't know how to change. And I've seen thousands of people like this, clients in my coaching career that have helped work through that. I've also been one myself. I call it being stuck is one word, but getting by or simply surviving. In the pandemic, this became so widespread that a term became popular, the term languishing. And it was used to describe this state that's somewhere between struggling and thriving. And people aren't really struggling. They don't need clinical help. They're not crashing and hitting rock bottom, but they're not really thriving. They're just sort of stuck in this middle ground, existing, being. Now, I have to point something out. Routines, habits, and schedules are great. But ideally, those things are in place to serve your growth, your happiness, and your fulfillment. Thriving means that you raise your baseline of clarity, health, happiness, well-being, even and particularly when times get hard. Because thriving when things are going well, that's pretty easy. It's the purpose and passion that you have that can help you do this even during tough times. But here's the thing. It might be a simple concept to understand, yet the principles are rarely followed consistently enough to help people raise that baseline. And we'll talk about how to do that in part 2 of this. I have to share a moment of truth here, something that I learned the hard way. And that's that passion isn't enough. You have to be passionate about something. You have to have your purpose, but there also needs to be something more. And for years, I used to say things like, I'm not in it for the money. I just want to help people, about my business and my career choice. And I meant it. Helping people is still one of the biggest drivers in my life and my business. But here's what I missed. Missing this nearly cost me everything. It's that I missed out. I neglected the fundamentals. Yes, I started my business to make a difference, but I avoided the spreadsheets. I avoided putting in the right systems. I undervalued having clear financial goals and really sticking to them. While my heart was full, my business model was running on fumes, and I didn't get the results I wanted. In fact, the ironic thing is that by not focusing on the essentials, I actually limited the number of people I could help, which went against my why. So yes, my why was noble, but without a structure or reality to support it, it was underpowered. And as I said, this was one of the toughest lessons in my career. I had to relearn how to align my purpose with my performance and how to link the passion in my heart with a strategy that actually created the results I wanted. Since then, I've started rebuilding. I've rebuilt myself from the inside out, and I'm continuing to do that on a day-to-day basis. Part of it is in clarifying my values, connecting them to both personal and professional goals, building better habits, and slowly finding a balance between freedom and focus, making a difference and earning the income, making a living that I want. And that's the shift. It's allowed me to help others in a much deeper and more sustainable way because, well, it's a great learning lesson. I had to go through it myself, and I can see it much more in others, which has helped me immeasurably in my career to help me live into my why. So it's a whole growth mindset thing, right? And this is how I like to explain it. Something I call the mindset, habit, why triangle. Think of your mindset as the operating system that your brain runs on. Your habits, those are the framework, the structure that brings your mindset to life each day. And your why, that's the power source, the emotional fuel that keeps it all running, especially when things get tough. And that's important to understand. As I said before, when things are going well, it's pretty easy to have your mindset and habits and everything line up. It's when things don't go well that your why really kicks in to help you connect those pieces again and keep it all moving forward in the most positive way. Now, each part of that triangle, mindset, habit, why, each part supports the others. You remove one, and the whole system starts to struggle. If you're missing your why, that emotional energy isn't there, you'll feel it. You'll lack motivation. You'll question yourself constantly. When things get hard, and of course they always do, you'll run out of steam. You'll quit. You'll settle. You'll stall out. You'll be frustrated and give up. This is why so many ambitious, talented people hit burnout. It's not because they're not capable, but because they're trying to perform without fuel. They have enough fuel for the sprint because with willpower and gut, you can grind your way or grind through anything for a short amount of time. But after a while, that just becomes exhausting. And without that extra fuel from your purpose, your passion, your why, it runs out and you hit burnout. Now, there's some other factors why so many people hit burnout from the performance standpoint, and we can talk about that in part 2 as well. But not having your why is a key part, or losing sight of your why. When we get so busy in today's world, we get task focused, and we sometimes forget to step back and say, why are we doing this? Why is it important to us? And when we can put in pieces and strategies in place to remind ourselves of that every day and live into it. Well, again, we'll talk about that more in part 2, but that's really what helps us sustain our performance over time. Now, let's talk about science for a moment, because all of this, purpose and passion stuff isn't just motivational fluff. There are literally decades of research backing up what I'm talking about here. Now, if we think about happiness as part of this puzzle. Traditionally, happiness was seen as a fixed trait, something that people are just naturally higher at than others. So some people are just more naturally happier than the next person, or naturally less happy. But research tells a different story. And I mention happiness because happiness is often the outcome. People say, I just want to be happy. If I earn more money, I'll be happy. If I do this, I'll be happy. Happiness is also, and this is really important, not an outcome. It's a process. It's a state of being. We can talk a bit more about what the factors are in that. But research shows that about 40% of your overall happiness is directly within your control. It's not determined by genetics or circumstances, but by your daily actions, your behaviors, your mindset. Now, the other portions come from about 50% from genetics and about 10% from your life circumstances. So that's a pretty significant amount of your happiness that comes into your direct control. Now, I want you to let that sink in, because a lot of people think it's all about the life circumstances or it's all about genetics. In fact, you have so much more control than you can imagine in your circumstances. No matter what the life circumstances throw at you, you do have a choice on how your actions, your behaviors, your mindset show up. And this is critically important and something I work really closely with clients in helping them tap into. So that means you can actively increase your level of happiness, fulfillment, performance through things like living into your purpose, building meaningful connections, doing kind things for others, and intentionally reconnecting with your why. Now, the best part is that a clear sense of purpose doesn't just feel good. It actually helps you perform better. Now, research shows that this leads to stronger daily energy, being more resilient under pressure, having better decision-making capabilities, higher engagement, even more creativity comes out of this. So companies like Ernst & Young, EY, they've created something called a Connect Day, where employees get to step out of the office, away from their regular tasks, and volunteer or engage in community work. And they still get paid for it like a regular day. Lots of companies have emulated this process. And the result is that engagement skyrockets. And there's such a stronger alignment with the company's mission. People are happier. They perform better at their jobs. Another great example is Google's famous 20% time. Engineers used to get to spend a day per week working on purpose-driven projects, something they cared about, something they just thought was cool and exciting that would benefit the company, but that they're still passionate about, and that might not be on the regular work docket. Some of the famous things that came from that: Gmail, AdSense, Google Maps, all fantastic examples of little side of the desk projects that some engineer thought was cool and that could be beneficial to the business. And how many billions of dollars have those products made for Google over the years? Countless. Now, interestingly, through conversations with several current Google employees, this 20% time isn't really a thing anymore and hasn't been for many years. They talk about how workloads have increased exponentially and that there's so much more demand on employees that this 20% time has fallen to the wayside. Technically, it's still there, but it's not really encouraged anymore, and people don't do it because they've just got so much other stuff on their plate. Now, I wonder how much of a factor this has been in the low engagement, high turnover, and decreased employee satisfaction challenges that Google has faced in recent years. We're seeing so much of that in the news, and people are struggling there. It's not the Google that it used to be for lots of reasons, and I'm sure there are many, many other factors outside the 20% time, but when we start to look at it, this becomes a foundational thing. Are people getting fulfillment from the job they're in, or are they just being driven into the ground? And have they lost sight of that purpose, the passion, the thing they like to do best? That's something to consider. So yeah, Purpose is great for people, but it's also fantastic for business. So here's a big takeaway for today. Knowing your why is not going to solve all your problems, but it will give those problems meaning. It will give you strength and help you face them with purpose. So when you're aligned with your why, the entire journey becomes more meaningful, more fulfilling, and to be fair, a lot more enjoyable. So the next episode, we're going to dive into the practical side. We'll talk about how to actually find your why, the difference between following your passion and being passionate about what you do. And we'll look at practical tools to bring your why, don't lie about it, practical tools to bring your why to life every single day. And this next part is where we really start to shift things, because it's not enough to just know your why. You have to live it, ideally every day. So if today's message landed with you, do me a favor. Please share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're ready to get clear on your why, or you want help with yourself or your team to connect with your why, reach out. I'd love to support you on that journey. Thank you for listening. I'll catch you in episode 2. That wraps up another episode of the Working Well podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Now, which guests or topics would you like to see featured on the show? Message me through LinkedIn or on the contact page of timborys.com with your ideas. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tim Borys with Fresh Wellness Group, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.